Uh, Hi guys, welcome to the session. Uh, this is one of the most, requested sessions that we are having today. Critical reasoning. When you start your preparation, I think that's that one section that really haunts you, right? And I think for 24 aspirants, this is going to be a very interesting session. I think we have Namya with us. She got an All India rank of 25 in CLAT 22. Apparently, she says that it is probably this section that probably got her National Law School Bangalore. You'll hear more about it from her, how she got a score of 26, 27 in this section. Probably more if I because I don't remember. Uh, I think this is an important session for all of you. Try to share it. And that's it. I think I'll pass it over to Namya and she'll take an interesting session for all of you. Uh, have a great time, guys.
Hi everyone. I think Aditya has given enough of an introduction for me. Yeah, I do owe a lot of me getting into analyst to the CR section because it did help me get a good score. And I think that the thing about CR section is that it will help you in your English and legal as well. The skills that you're going to gain in your CR preparation, just how to go about the passage, how to, get the main idea, the gist out of it. It is not only which is something which is restricted to the CR only, but it will help in your English and legal as well. So, how I intend to go about this session today is that first I'll give a brief about how to go about the section, how to go about the passages, how to deal with hard passages in 15-20 minutes, and then we can solve certain passages together so that we can better understand that what I've talked about, how to apply that. Okay. Yeah. So first, let's talk about how to navigate the CR section as a whole, and secondly, how to approach the passages. Now, when it comes to the CR section, you can always have two approaches to it. First would be that you just get into the section, you start attempting from the first passage itself, right? Now, the second approach which is available to you is that you just open your booklet and you go through the section once. You read, get a general idea of what all genres are there in the section. You see, okay, you have an economics passage, you have a history passage, you have a philosophy passage. You go through that and then you try to pick an order for yourself. So for me, I was more comfortable with say international relations or like general editorial pieces. So what I would do is that I would go about the section and I would start with those easy passages, right? And then I would move to the hard passages, say the philosophical ones or say like economics ones, right? So what helps you, this strategy would help you to maximize your score, because when you start with the section, you have a fresh mind, you're more easy, you're more comfortable, so you can score in the passages which are easy for you, and later on towards the end you can move to the hard passages. So even if you have a crunch of time, you can just attempt 2-3 questions from those passages and move on. If you pick the hard passages initially, you get tired and you get sort of scared that, oh my god, I haven't been able to gain more marks in the initial paragraphs, what am I going to do later on? So if you just go through the section once, it would help you so that you can navigate through the section more easily according to your strengths and weaknesses. So that is one way to approach the section, but of course there is no right or the correct way. There is no one approach to it. So you can choose your own way, but this is something that you can try out in a few months and see if it works for you. Right. Now the second thing that I would want to talk about is that how to approach a passage. Now, when we talk about approaching a passage, again, you can have like two methods to it. First would be like you just start reading the paragraph, you read the passage once, then you move to the questions. And when you're doing the questions, you see that, okay, fine, I have to get the main idea, I have to talk about the purpose, I have to talk strength and weaken, and then you go back to the passage according to the questions and answer. Now, this is one way. Now, the other way, which generally I used to do, was that whenever I started approaching a passage, what I used to do was I first used to go to the question stems. And in 10-15 seconds, I used to do a quick glance over the question stems that, okay, fine, what are the sort of questions that I have to answer from this passage? So, like, you would have main idea question. So, this trick helps you that, there are certain question stems that what does the author mean by XYZ statement? So, when you have read the question stems first before going to the passage, how is that going to help you? Because number one, you would have an idea of such sort of questions. Now, if I know that in the for this particular set, I have a question which demands me to give extra attention to a particular line. So when I'm reading the passage, what I'm going to do is that in the first go itself, I'm going to read the lines above that particular sentence and after that particular sentence more carefully, so that I do not waste time going back to that sentence and then reading that portion over again, which, extreme more careful attention. Because when we read the passage in CLAT, we do not give like specific attention to each and every line with equal, gravity. What we do is that we skim through some parts, we read some parts more with more vigor. So that's the thing, that if you know that there is a particular sentence that the question demands of you to understand more, and if you know about it, then when you go back to the passage in the first go itself, you can give particular attention to it, so you'll end up saving more time. Secondly, when you go through the question stems once, you get an idea of the questions. That are most of the questions about inferences, are most about the main idea, is it about purpose, is it about strength and weaken. And so when you read the passage, you read the passage with that mindset, right? So when you get a general mindset of how you have to read the passage, like if there is a conclusion question or a main idea question, you can give specific attention to that point, that okay, fine, when I've read the passage, let me just get a gist of it and have the main idea in my mind. So you can help if you go where the question stems first, so you have a basic idea, and then you go back to the passage and read it in that way according to that strategy. So I think that is one thing which would help you go, like try the second method. But of course, again, there is no correct or the right method. You can go with the first as well, but just try going with the second as well. And today when we solve questions, we'll try it with the second approach, that we'll first just skim through the question stems in 10-15 seconds, then we'll go back to the passage and then read it, and then we'll move to the question solving. So that is about it, how to like navigate through the section as a whole and how to approach the passages. Then I think one thing which we all face in the paper is that how to go about hard passages. Like if you have a difficult passage, as to like say there is a philosophical passage and I'm not very comfortable with it, so how to go about it. So towards the end of my preparation, how I used to work with hard passages were at kind of at three levels. First, I used to work at the question level, second at the options level, and then at the passage level. As in, let me just substantiate it more, and if this approach works for you, you can like work around it. So first is that if I feel that there is a philosophical passage and I'm not very comfortable with it, now one thing which you need to understand is that every time when you like give a passage, there aren't going to be all difficult five questions. Every time out of the five questions, there are going to be like two questions which are going to be very easy. There are going to be two questions which are going to be of the medium level, and then there are going to be one question which is going to be difficult, right? Sometimes it's going to be too difficult, one medium, and sort of like that. There isn't going to be any passage where you're going to get like five difficult questions put in all together, right? So when there is a hard passage, what you need to do is that you need to figure out, I know this like sounds easy and it's difficult to put in, but this is something which may help you to get marks when there is a hard passage. Don't go in with the target of attempting all five questions. What you need to figure out is that you need to figure out those two or three questions which are easy, which are medium, which you can grab marks from. Don't go attempting the hard questions when the passage itself is very hard to understand in the first place. So we need to pick out those easy questions and then see. Now, when it comes to answering those questions, there is a general thing which generally works. So when there is an easy passage, of course, you know what the author is talking about, you know all the arguments, you know the premises from which the arguments have been made. You have a very good idea of the passage. But when it is a hard passage, you're not able to understand everything. So what you can do is that just read the passage once, just get a general idea about what the passage is about. Okay, so say it's an economics passage, just get a general idea that, okay, fine, the author is talking about India's growth rate and he has substantiated over 5 or 6 sectors. This is a general idea that I need to get, right? And towards the end, if you're able to like take out of it, then just take the general stance of the author. You don't need to know like the particulars of what the author is talking about or like everything about it, but then just try to figure out that, okay, fine, maybe the author is of the stance that India's growth rate right now is pretty much slow for a developing country, or is it, or like the general stance of the author is that, okay, fine, the India is going well on a right path right now. So just try to get a general idea of the author's stance and what the general passage is about. If you're able to figure these two things out of a hard passage, not the particulars or the premises or anything of it, you will be able to answer those two easy questions. And when you spend 3-4 minutes and you're able to get 2 or 3 questions out of those 5 in a hard passage, that's more than enough. You do not need to get worked up about answering all 5 questions. Doing this is enough. And now, when it comes to reading a hard passage, how do you go about it? Now, over here, I think that annotating would really help. Now, generally, you would like either get a big chunk as one paragraph, or what can happen is that you would get like multiple paragraphs and then there is a passage. So when you go about it, what you can try to do is that try annotating, just highlighting, underlining, those sort of things. Try underlining the identifier words. What you can try is that to figure out the gist of each paragraph that is there. Okay, so paragraph 1, the main idea is somewhat this. Paragraph 2, main idea is somewhat this. Then try to figure out, okay, fine, maybe author is somewhere going over there. So in hard passages, don't worry about tackling all 5 questions. Try to identify the easy questions first, then walk about the options. Of course, elimination is your trick number one for CR. So you go by elimination, but just try to get a general idea of the stance of the author and what the passage is all about. And don't fret about answering all 5 questions. You're not supposed to do that when it's a hard passage, or the questions are difficult, or the options are difficult. Answering 2 or 3 is enough. You do not want to end up with negatives just because you want to, deliver your best in a hard passage. It's okay to leave the hard passages for the end and then just try to like answer out 2 or 3 questions at max. That's okay. Now, just some general tips and tricks for like a CR section would be like, so just a few things to keep in mind when you're trying to attempt the CR section. So like first, annotate the passage. That's very important. Like when you're reading the passage, so you would have, some would be pure factual statements, like India's growth rate is 25% or something like that. Now these are the statements that you need to skim through. You do not need to retain them in your mind. What you need to retain is the opinions or the conclusions which the author is building on from those premises. Those are the things that you need to identify, categorize while reading the passage, and underline. So we underline the opinions or the conclusions or what the author has kind of elicited from all the premises that the author has given. Now, one thing which might help you is that whenever you read a sentence, try to figure out why has the author written it. What is the reason or the purpose, right? Because if say you or me, if I'm writing some article or a piece today, then every line I put in that article has some reason behind it. I'm not just putting it to fulfill like 500 words or something. Right? When I'm writing that article, every line has a reason or a purpose behind it. There is a reason why I've written that particular information there. Right? So try to figure out what is the why behind that sentence, what was the purpose behind writing that sentence. When you're able to figure out that purpose or the reason, it becomes very easy to like understand the main idea or what was the purpose behind writing that passage. So that is one thing. Try to figure out the reason behind each sentence. Annotate the passages. That's very important. Then the identifier words, like you have therefore, thus, but, to conclude, these sort of words. Whenever you see these words, just circle them. These would be like help you to arrive at conclusions, like, or extreme words like always, all those sort of words. Just circle them, because generally these are the words that trap you, like always sort of words. So identify words and extreme words, try to circle them whenever you're reading the passage, so that you do not have to go up and down the passage up and again. When you're reading it the first go, circle such words. Now, one thing which I feel is that, of course, I shared you that first, before going to the question stems, just get a general idea and then go back to the passage. Now, one thing which generally we end up getting negatives with is that we do not put full attention when we're reading the question stems. So, like words like cannot, accept, does not, agree. So the words like not, accept, does not, these sort of words we generally skip while reading, and then we answer the question wrong, because the question says which of the following can be inferred or cannot be inferred, and we just skim through it and we answer the can answer, whereas the question is asking you for cannot. So all these sort of words in the question stems, circle them. I think this is one thing that really helped me throughout my entire paper, that when you're reading the question stems, do circle or underline or take a special note of the words like not, accept, agree, disagree, or for English section you have synonym, antonym, those sort of words. Just circle them so that you do not miss out on those things. That's very important. Circle them. And then you would have questions where the option would be none of the above. But the options like none of the above are generally, they kind of tend to be like you tend to go for those options, none of the above, all of the above. And 70-80% they are the correct answers as well, but don't think of it as a pattern in questions. Now, especially when you have none of the above. When you have none of the above, don't try to fit in every option. Go through the options carefully, eliminate. Now, when it comes to elimination, how you work about elimination. Now, don't always try to look for the correct option or the right option. This is one thing in CLAT, that even the correct answer is not going to be like 100% correct. And a lot of times when we see the CLAT answer key, we stress, okay, you know what, this answer is not correct. There are still flaws in it. It isn't 100% perfect answer. And that's completely true. You're going to find flaws in the correct answer key as well. But what you need to remember here is that you need to go for the best option, not for the perfect option. So out of all the four options, what you need to figure out is that which is that one option which is like least able that you're least able to eliminate out of all four. That is your task here. Don't try to look out for the correct option. Try to first look out for the wrong options, the options which are completely out of scope, which are extreme, like words like always, never, those sort of words. They're used in options and they're generally identifier for like, okay, fine, this option is very extreme, it needs to be eliminated, unless and until you find a very strong opinion of that sort in the passage itself. So when you're working with elimination, what you need to do is that look out for those extreme options, look out for like completely tangential options, or of course, which is going against the idea, that's clearly discernible. So against the author's opinion, completely out of scope, the ones which is using extreme words or extreme phrases. When you eliminate those sort of options, generally two options can be eliminated using these 3-4 areas, then you're left with very two close options. But when you're stuck with two close options, what generally works is that try to figure out what is the difference between those two. If those two options are going around the same idea, just try to figure out what is that slim difference between those two options. Once you're able to figure out that, you'll be very easily able to eliminate one of them. So when you're stuck with two options, that's a question that you should attempt, because because now you have a 50% chance of getting to the correct answer when you're left with two options. But in between those two options, try to figure out what the difference is. Is there a particular line that maybe you missed in the passage or something like that? Maybe then you're able to eliminate one. When you figure out the subtle difference between those two options, then you can eliminate one of those. So I think that would be it. How to approach the section, how to navigate through it, how to approach the passages, what are the different methods you can go about, what are the general things you can keep in mind, and how to deal with hard passages. Now, I think we can move to certain passage solving, and towards the end, we can take any doubts, or you can put it in the Telegram group as well. So let's solve certain questions, and then we can see, like, let's apply all those sort of things while solving the passages itself. Yeah. Yeah, I think the screen is visible. Okay. So I'll read the passage along with you guys. We'll take around 2.5 minutes just reading the passage. First, we'll go to the question stems, see what are the question stems, then we'll move to the passage, read it, and then we'll solve the questions together. That's how we'll go about. Right. So for this passage, if we see, you also get a general idea of what the passage is about when you go to the question stem, like EC's proposal. Okay, so words like except, these needs to be taken a special care of. So the effectiveness of the EC's proposal is contingent on all of the following except. Then you have a question on strengthens. Then now see, over here you have a question that they are both the target and victim of beneficiary fiscal irresponsibility. Now when you have a particular sentence that the author has asked of you in the questions, what helps here is that when this line comes across you in the passage, take a special note of it, of the sentences which are above it or the sentences which are below it, so that you do not have to go back again and read this part all over again with special attention. Now you know that there is a question on this line, right? Now, which of the following is true as per the passage and what could have been the purpose, right? So we have a general idea of what the questions are about, and there isn't any new or creative question stem as well. They are pretty General. Okay, so we'll read the passage together. So the EC's proposal to make political parties spell out and cost out their poll promises is interesting. It means parties having to submit a fiscal costing of poll promises as part of submissions required by the MCC. As conversations go, the EC idea is a good first step. However, for this route to be rationalizing freebies to be effective, the MCC will need to get legal teeth, which is itself a contentious proposition. At present, it is a set of guidelines. Now, if we see in the first paragraph, then we can see that there isn't much of a very strong opinion of the author which we can take out. It's more descriptive and factual as of now, but we can see that okay, fine, the ECIDA is a good first step as conversations go, and but the author does say that the MCC will need to get legal teeth, but it is a contentious proposition. That is it. Okay, now the second. Now the proposal requires parties to work out the financial implications of their poll promises, including how they plan to finance the promises, whether it would involve higher taxes and cuts in other government expenditure. Given the growing concern over runaway subsidies and freebies across parties, the EC proposal offers a way out. Now, a party responding to this suggestion of sharing information about how its poll promise can impact fiscal health and government expenditures itself can determine show of good intent that the voter should take into consideration before making her choice. Now, this is somewhere that we can see a little bit of author's opinion. This is not exactly factual in itself. That okay, fine, it can determine show of good intent that the voters should take into account. But voters on their part, not this line, but voters on their part need to value such information to make informed decisions and understand that they are both the target and victim of beneficiary fiscal responsibility. Now, this is also a line that we have a question on. So, when you have such a line, give special attention to it or like the part above and below it. Okay. Now, following the 2015 direction of the Apex Code, the EC incorporated guidelines and manifestos in the MCC in which parties are required to explain the rational and financial requirements of their poll promises. However, in practice, parties have been ambiguous and parsimonious in their declarations. Also, not much demand for such information sharing has been evident among the votary itself. Such a proposal should become enforceable by law. Now, this is the author's opinion, but for that, one needs consensus first in a democracy, and the availability of information may not always automatically lead to rational political choices, but hopefully it will lead to considered ones. So, when you read the passage, you highlight the lines which seem like the author's opinion to you, and you just skim through the factual information otherwise. Now, the first question. The effectiveness of the EC's proposal, according to the author, is contingent on all of the following except. So if we read this question, you have the first question, MCC getting legal enforceability rather than just being limited to guidelines. Yes, this has been mentioned by the author over here that the MCC will need to get legal teeth, though it is a contentious proposition. Secondly, voters necessarily making rational political choices given the availability of the information. If you look at this line, then this is kind of opposite to what the author has written in the towards the end of the passage. That the availability of information over here may not always automatically lead to rational political choices. Now, if you look at this line, then we see that the second option goes sort of against what the author has written in the passage, that it isn't necessary that it should always lead to rational political choices. And when we say that the voter is necessarily making rational political choices, it is a condition contingent for the effectiveness of the EC's proposal. So we have the right option over here because the question asks for accept. Now the third and the fourth option, political parties giving honest information, being candid in their declarations and providing complete data. That is absolutely true. And the assumptions on which the finances have been calculated do work out in reality. That is also true. So we have the answer over here, which is option B. Now we move to the second question. Which of the following, if true, strengthens the author's argument in the passage? Now we have to strengthen the author's argument. So if we read this question, we have first, the current guidelines as drafted give a lot of leeway for the political parties to selectively disclose their fiscal plans. Now this actually does not strengthen, but in a way very mildly weakens the author's argument because author isn't supportive of the guidelines, but when we say that the current guidelines give a leeway for the political parties to just select which information to disclose and which not to disclose, then this would end up with the political parties with not being honest with their disclosure. So this goes against the idea of strengthening. Second option, so we can eliminate the first. A similar plan devised by EC to limit and regulate election spending has proved to be successful in the past. Now, such options that, okay, fine, so like a proposal worked in the past, so we can say that the current proposal would also work. Now, this is a very weak argument to put forward for strengthening, say, a new proposal. So, if there is a new proposal, I need to argue on the merits of that particular proposal. I cannot say that a proposal worked in the past, so it's going to work in the present as well, which is a very weak sort of argument to support. So, we can eliminate this as well. Third, when you find such an option which is very mildly strengthening or sort of neutral, don't eliminate it right away. What you can do is that just keep it at the back of your mind. If you get a better option, go ahead with it or come back to it. Generally, these sort of options don't work because they are very mild in their nature. Now, the third option. The current guidelines are only applicable to the political parties which are operating at a multiple state basis and not regional parties. Now, this is kind of restricting the scope of the proposal actually, so this is not going to strengthen the argument. Now, the fourth is that the EC has a mechanism to ensure that the political parties provide credible information in their declarations. Now, this is an option that would strengthen because one of the concerns that the author has expressed is that he has written that they are very parsimonious in the information that they declare. So if I say that the EC has a mechanism which would ensure that they are providing credible and complete information, then that is going to strengthen my proposal, right? And if you compare it with the B as well, if you contrast the two, then D is much strong in its strengthening. So we would go with the D option and we would eliminate B as well. Now we go to the third question. They are both the target and victim of beneficiary fiscal irresponsibility. What does the author seem to suggest by this here? Now, if we see this question, then first we have is that the reckless overall government spending will affect the very citizenry group it was intended to cater to. Okay, though I do feel that the overall government spending is a very broad term to talk about, then the second option is says the beneficiary schemes don't actually cater to the needs of the voters and in fact end up doing the opposite. Now, if you read this option carefully, then this option is actually talking about the beneficiary schemes. What we are talking about is the fiscal part of it. We are not talking about the effectiveness of those beneficiary schemes in themselves. What we are talking about is how is the government going about the fiscal part of the behind those beneficiary schemes. So if we talk about the B, it may seem like a very lucrative option at first because this is directly what the option, like what the statement says, but we're not talking about the beneficiary schemes or the effectiveness of them. We're talking about the fiscal responsibility behind that. Now, the third, any unthoughtful taxes or budget cut to implement the beneficiary schemes for the voters will, in the end, be a burden on the voters itself. If you look at this option, then what this is saying is that the government, any cut it uses or any tax it puts on, that is the fiscal part of it, right? So that which is actually intended to help the voters will actually end up being a burden on the voters itself. Now, this is the correct option because this directly connects to what the passage says. And in the what's the last option? That in the end, it is the voters who have to determine whether the beneficiary poll promises of the political parties are viable. This is not relevant at all, and this is not connected to what the statement says as well. So by elimination, we were able to arrive at the third is the correct option. Now we go to the fourth question, which says, which of the following is true as per the passage? Okay, so the current EC proposal, if implemented effectively, will always lead to the voters making rational decisions. Number one, this is an extreme option, and number two, this also goes against what clearly has been mentioned by the author, as we discussed towards the end, that the availability of information may not automatically always lead to rational political decisions. So this is eliminated. Second, given the EC proposal, parties would now need to prepare a fiscal blueprint on how they plan to finance their poll promises. This is totally true. This is what the passage is talking about. Let's just quickly glance over the other two options. The current guidelines would solve the problem with runaway freebies and subsidies. This is a very extreme thing to say that it would completely solve that problem. That is not what the author is towards the idea of. And last says that in current times, all political parties across ideologies indulge in freebie politics, and due to this, the current plan will most probably not succeed. Number one, this is very much out of the scope because now we are talking about that all political parties do this, and just because they indulge in this, the plan will not succeed. This is nowhere the author's opinion. So we have gotten our answer, which is option B. Now, the last question of the passage. what could have been the purpose of the author behind writing the above passage? When we talk about the purpose of the passage, what we are actually trying to figure out is that what was the reason that the passage was written? What is the main argument that the author is trying to put forward through the passage? What is the main idea that he's talking about? So, if we go about that, then the first option says analyze the new EC proposal of mandating political parties to furnish how they would plan their government spending. Seems like a good option, but let's read the others. Second says critique and also give recommendations on the EC's new proposal. Now, these two are very close options. Now, if you just so if you were in a hurry, you would have read the first option, it would have seemed correct, and you would have marked that. But if you read the second option, then what the difference is that the second option actually goes one step ahead. So first is analyze. When you're analyzing, that means that I am saying that okay, fine, this is the proposal, these are the pluses of it, these are where it fails, and this is the whole idea of the proposal. Now, second option says that I'm critiquing. The author is critiquing that proposal. Critique does not mean criticism. Critique means that I'm analyzing it, I'm going about it, how it is going to work out in reality, what are its hits and misses. But the second part of the option says, and also give certain recommendations. Now, if we go back to the passage, we actually see that the author is not only like critiquing, but he is also giving certain suggestions that it should have legal teeth, or the proposal should become enforceable by law, but you need consensus and all those sort of things. So he's also recommending certain things. So if we see that the second option goes one step ahead, and if we contrast both options, then B is more suitable than A. So we can eliminate A for now and we would stick with B. Now the second two, then the other two options is that give reasons why the EC's proposal on freebies is likely to fail. Okay, so this is not what the author is talking about. We are not talking about the failure or the proposal or the reasons behind that. And the last is suggest ways in which EC and the MCC can be made more effective. Now, this option, if you don't give much attention to it, it may seem correct, but if you see, then this is way too broad. It is talking about the effectiveness of EC and MCC in a totality. We are not talking about the election commission as a whole institution. We are just talking about EC's new proposal. So we also need to make sure, like if you read the first two options, they particularly mention EC's proposal because that's what the passage is about. The fourth option is too broad in its scope. It's talking about EC and MCC as a whole. That's way beyond the scope of the passage. So if we go over how we attempted this passage, then first we went to the question stems. We also found a question which talked about a particular line. So when we were reading that line, we knew where it was. We marked that line specifically so that if we are not able to figure out, we can go back to it. That was one thing. And then we read about we talked about marking the identifier words like except, talking about extreme options where you have words like always or never or like those sort of words. Then when we talk about elimination, we see if there are options which are out of scope or if there are options which are very tangential or which go exactly opposite to what the author is saying. When you get very two close options like we did over here, so these two were very close options, then you try to figure out what is the difference. So the difference over here was that the second option went one step ahead. So that is where you see, okay, fine, so that is the difference. Now you go back to the passage and see, is the author actually giving certain recommendations? If the author is, then we would stick with B. But if we see that the author has not actually given any recommendations, it is just talking about the pluses and the minus, then what we will go is that we would have stuck with option A itself and we would have eliminated the B option. So that's how you go about a passage, that we go for the question stems, then we go to the passage, and then we attempt. Now, what we can do with the next passage is that I would we can go with the question stems. Then I would put up a timer for 2 minutes. So you can read the passage by yourself for 2 minutes. I'll scroll through the questions for another 2 minutes. You attempt the questions yourself first, and then we can discuss. So that's how we'll go about. So, okay, let's go to the questions first. We have objective of the author. All of the following can be said to be true except. Then the third question is, what is the central point that the author is trying to make? Then what does the author probably mean by a particular statement? The defendant refusing to express regret is the proud man's contumely. So now this is a part that you need to give specific attention to when you read the passage. And the last question says, which of the following can be inferred? So you have inference, you have a specific line question, you have the central point, true, and what is the purpose of the author behind the passage. So, yeah, I'll set a timer for 2 minutes. You can take 2 minutes to read the passage, and then we'll move forward. Yeah, so. Right. So, yeah, let's start. So basically, this passage was about the power of to contempt proceedings, which is given to the courts. Yes, and the main author of the opinion towards the end, which I could decipher, was that basically he's talking about that there is no actual need for contempt proceedings to be there in itself, because if the institutions are, they have their institutions of integrity, then they don't need that. And in the similar way, if the institutions are already corrupt in itself, then there is also no need for the corrupt contempt proceedings in itself. So it was basically about questioning the need for the contempt proceedings in itself. Now we can move to the questions. What could have been the objective of the author behind this passage? So the first option says, to bring to fore the pathetic condition of the Indian judiciary when it comes to maintaining integrity of the institution and its commitment to citizens' right. Now, if you look at this option, then this seems way too broad because it's talking about the overall condition of the Indian judiciary as a whole, when it comes to maintaining integrity. Now, the scope of the passage was actually very limited when it comes to option A. Second, to question the need of the power granted to the courts to punish for its own contempt. Now, this seems like an option that we can work out because this is narrow in its scope, very much limited to what the passage was talking about. The third option says to evaluate the effectiveness of the criminal contempt proceedings carried by the Indian courts. Now, when we talk about the third option and the second option, they may seem very close. But the difference is that the second option questions the need, and the third option focuses on the effectiveness of the proceedings. Now, we are not talking about the effectiveness of the proceedings as such. That what's the whole procedure of those proceedings in itself. That's not what the author is focusing on. The author is focusing on what is the power. Is there actual need for there to be a provision for contempt proceedings in itself? Right. Now, the fourth option, to suggest ways by which the apex court can help retain and maintain public faith in the institution. Very much like the first option, this is too broad in its idea. So, in between B and C, I think B is a better option because it sticks to what the passage is about, which is to question the need of the power which is granted. Now, the second question, all of the following can be said to be true based on the text, except. Now, as alleged by former judges, the apex court is not as committed to the issues to personal liberty as it should be as a guardian of the same. When we look at this question, Okay, as alleged by former judges, the apex court is not as committed to the issues to personal liberty. Should be guardian of the same. Okay. Second option says the activities of the courts as a whole and of the judges as well are the predominant factors that affect the public's faith in the judiciary. This is also true. Then this is, I think, written towards the beginning only. That, however, recent experience as well as public criticism of former judges and legal luminaries shows the principal source of public disenchantment is the conduct of the courts and judges. This is what the second option focuses on. Third says a few years earlier, the then CGI had misused its power to sway the outcome of certain cases. Now, this option, if you just take a glance over it, you may say that it's true. But the thing over here, the catch over here is that when the author has mentioned about CGI misusing its power, it has been used as an allegation. So over here, four judges of the Supreme Court publicly accused the CGI of misusing his power to influence the outcome of cases. Now, this is not an affirmative claim that has been made by the author that the CGI did misuse the power. What the passage says is that it has been alleged that the CGI used the power. So, if we look at the third option, it may be true, it may not be true. But based on the limited information that has been given in the passage, we cannot give a very conclusive opinion about the third option. So, that would be one. And what's the fourth option? There is a possibility that the Indian Supreme Court is working hand in glove with the executive. Now, over here as well, when you read this part over here, former judges and lawyers routinely pen articles questioning the commitment of the apex court to issues of personal liberty and even hint at complicity before and cravenness before the executive. Now, again, just like the C option, this is also something that has been alleged by, say, legal luminaries. This is not a conclusive statement. But the option itself says that there is a possibility. Unlike the C option, which makes a very affirmative claim about that part, the D option is also merely hinting at a possibility of such a thing. So that's the difference. So that was the catch over here. That most of the statements were sort of opinions that were expressed, even the first option, that the apex court is not as committed to issues of personal liberty. But the other two options clearly mention that okay, there is a possibility or it has been alleged, but the C option makes a very conclusive claim about that being true, which is something that we cannot infer from the passage. So C would be the correct answer because we cannot say that it is true based on what limited information that we have been given. Now, the third question. What is the central point that the author is trying to make in the passage? The first is that the conviction of the accused in a criminal contempt proceeding is an unjustified and futile exercise since it serves no meaningful purpose. Okay. Second option says that the current judicial process while conducting the contempt proceedings has huge scope for improvement since the apex court is being served by judges of integrity. Now, the B option is talking about a scope for improvement. Now, the author's stance is that there is no need for such proceedings per se. There is no need as a whole. When we talk about improvement, we are saying that okay, fine, we are okay with the concept of it, but it just need to be approved. There are certain gaps which are present which you can mend. So, if you look at B, then that is not what the author is talking about. Third option says that apex court, along with the lower judiciary, has failed to keep up its responsibility of upholding rights and protecting the trust placed by the citizens in the judiciary. Now, in this option, there are two things which are problematic, which you can figure out. First is that the lower judiciary. There has been no talk about lower judiciary as a whole over here. So, apex court, along with the lower judiciary, kind of expands the scope and goes on a different tangent. Secondly, keep up its responsibility of upholding rights and protecting the trust. When it comes to upholding rights, that is also not what the passage very much talks about, because when it comes to upholding rights is a much more broader thing than just maybe attacking the court's integrity and the trust that is placed in the institution of judiciary. So the scope of the passage was just limited to the latter part, not to court upholding the rights as a whole, and secondly the part the lower judiciary is playing in this whole scheme. So C also goes beyond the scope. and D is none of the above. Now, when you come with an option of none of the above, so you have A and you have none of the above, and you have to choose. Now, the conviction of the accused in a criminal contempt proceeding is an unjustified and futile exercise since it serves no meaningful purpose. If you actually look at A, then it fits very much into what the author is saying. He is saying that it is a futile exercise. There is no actual benefit that is coming out of it. That is what the author is talking about. Then it is an option that you should go for over options like none of the above. So the answer would over here would be option A. Now the fourth question. What does the author probably mean by the defendant refusing to express regret is the proud man's contumely? Now, contumely basically means like an abuse or slander, that sort of thing, an insult which you put to another person. That's the thing. So, if you read the first option, just like the judiciary refusing to be more tolerant of criticism, the accused in the contempt proceeding refused to be more mindful and considerate. Okay. The second option says that the defendant in the contempt proceedings must feel guilty for his remarks in order for the judiciary to become more understanding and accepting. B does not really fit in because it's talking about that the defendant has to feel guilty for his remarks so that the judiciary becomes more understanding. There is no like cause and effect relation over here that has been expressed. Then we go for the third option is that the failure of the one accused in contempt proceedings to express remorse for his contempts amounts to disrespect and sneer towards the judicial institution. I think this is an option which very much mirrors the statement. Let's go back to the statement once again just to read the part where it is written. Yeah. If the court viewing any display of magnanimity as a sign of weakness is the oppressor's wrong, the defendant refusing to express regret is the proud man's contumely. So, okay, basically the author has connected the refusal to express regret to expressing insult or slander towards the institution. So, if the accused in the contempt proceeding is not being very remorseful or accepting that, okay, fine, he has committed something wrong or something which he or she should not have committed, then that is basically being very disrespectful or abusive or insulting towards the institution of judiciary. That is the idea in this line. So, if we go to the options, I think C was the one which perfectly fits to it. The fourth option says that the pride of the defendant accused of contempt translates into his refusal to admit his guilt. Again, the fourth again establishes a very causal connection between your refusal and, say, you being proud of it. So there is no such cause and effect that has been established that when your pride gets in the way, it results into a refusal. The C basically says that those two are being equated. That when you're failing to say express remorse, then that is disrespect. But there is no A leading to B or B leading to A sort of relation that can be taken out from this statement. Just like A, I think A was just like the judiciary refusing to be more tolerant, though the aspect of judiciary has been given in the sentence as a whole when we go to the passage. But this particular question just asks about the latter part of the sentence, and the idea of that is very much captured in the third option. Much better than the A one because the A is not talking anywhere about the defendant's refusal and the sneer that you can infer from that. So I think that is one part which makes C a better option over A. Then the last question from this passage is that which of the following can be inferred from the passage? So when the citizenry knows that the judge is seated at the court's display property, then no man's word otherwise can change this image. And the second says that public commentaries and opinions attacking the judiciary have a consequential impact on how people place their belief in the institution. Then if we go about this question, then I think which of the following can be inferred from the passage? So, when the citizenry knows that the judge is seated at the court's display property, then no man's word otherwise can change this image. This is absolutely true. This is what the author is trying to say towards the end. That in truth, any conviction for criminal contempt is unwarranted, for nothing can really scandalize the court, people by judges of integrity. That if there are actually judges of integrity sitting at the court, then no amount of attacks or sort of negative remarks about the court can actually make people lose their faith in that institution itself. So A is true. The second says that public commentaries and opinions attacking the judiciary have a consequential impact on how people place their belief. Now, this goes exactly against what the author's opinion is, which is expressed in the first, that public commentaries and those sort of things, they're not going to have a consequential impact on the people if the judges who are over there are actually people of integrity. Or similarly, the other way around, if they are corrupt in itself, then no amount of public commentaries or opinions and those sort of things are actually going to have any impact on how the people view the institution as a whole. So I think the first option fits into it, because the questions are which of the following can be inferred. So A can be inferred, B cannot be inferred. So obviously C and D are eliminated, and A would be your answer. So yeah, we sort of solved two passages today, and I think whatever I had mentioned in the initial part of the session, that how you can go about the passages, you go to the question stems first, try to underline, try to categorize. So basically, when you're reading the passage, when you're annotating it, you are basically trying to separate out the premises, the factual information, the descriptive part of the passage from the opinionated part, or the conclusions, or the maybe the sub conclusions, the conclusions, the main point that the author is trying to build on the premises, the part which is he's trying to prove, what he's trying to prove from the passage. So that is what you have to highlight, and that is what you have to retain in your mind when you're attempting those five questions. Now, going back to the passage helps, but when you read the question stems first, you have a very fair idea of what the questions are going to ask you about. So when you go to the passage, in the first go itself, read it with that mindset that, okay, fine, these are the sort of questions that I have to answer later on. So that is something that it helps you. And I think, again, the passages we encountered today were very much editorial in their themes. Now, you may come across passages which are very philosophical in their nature. So, when it comes to philosophical passages or passages that you are not comfortable with, first thing, don't stress out. When you see that passage, just don't get very worked up that, oh my god, this is something which I'm not very comfortable with. You are going to encounter a passage or two which you would not be very comfortable with, but what you have to do is that see the questions, work out with the options. There aren't going to be five questions which are going to be difficult. What you need to figure out is that you need to come out with those two, three questions which you can answer out of those hard passages as well. Because when it's an easy passage, you try to hit all the five questions, right? And you target at least getting three or four of them correct. You try to hit all five questions because it's an easy passage. You were able to understand that. You were able to understand what the argument is, what is the premises, what is everything about it. But when it comes to a hard passage, you're not able to understand the passage 100%. So you need to figure out the easy questions out of the five. Maybe the options are easy, some are straight away eliminated, like we were doing the questions. So some statements were which were extremely, like, totally completely opposite of what the author was saying. And that is something that if you just skim through the passage, you get a general idea about what is the author's stance. Is he in favor of something, like the EC passage? Then you could see that the author was in favor of the proposal, like as such, but he had a few recommendations to give to further improve the proposal. So then when that is an idea, and maybe if it was a, say, a difficult passage but somewhat of this sort, then what you could have done is that you would have taken a general idea that, okay, fine, the passage is about some EC proposal. If you're not able to understand what it is, fine, just get an idea, okay, fine, it is about a new proposal, something about fiscal responsibility, something. And what's the author's stance about it? Author seems to be in favor of it. When you have these two things in mind, that okay, it's about an easy proposal and the author kind of seems to be in favor of it, then when you go to the questions, there would be one or two questions which you can answer just based on this broad idea. So when it's a difficult passage, don't try to figure out 100% complete in and out of the passage. Just skim through it, get a general idea, stance of the author, and try to figure out those two or three easy questions which can be answered from that information. That is what you have to do when it's a hard passage and you're not able to understand the passage completely. Other than that, go to the section, go about it, see which are the passages which are easy. Okay, fine, this is the order that I'm going to follow. I'm going to go with the easy passages first, then I'm going to move to the difficult passages. That's the scheme that you're going to follow. Then, if you prefer, go to the question stems first. Make a note of the identifier words while reading the passage, and while reading the question stems, words like not, except, those sort of words. Agree, disagree, strengthen, weaken, those sort of words. Underline them, circle them, so that you do not miss them while answering the questions. Because what happens is that CLAT is a paper where there is a constant crunch of time that you face, and you do not have time to, give a special attention to each and every word that you are reading. So what you have to do is that you skim through a lot of things, like completely. So when it comes to that, you need to circle certain words so that you do not miss out on them, because they are important, they are crucial. You do not want that you are spending 5 minutes on a passage and just because you did not read a word like not or say except, you end up with minus 0.25 except for where you could have gotten a plus 1. So those sort of words need to be underlined, need to be circled, so that you do not lose marks over there. And just try to figure out what is the reason behind every sentence, what is the purpose behind every sentence, what could have been the reason that the author put that particular sentence over there. When you can do that, you would be able to answer inferences, you would be able to answer the main point, what is the conclusion, what is the purpose behind it. All those sort of questions which you generally encounter in a CR section can be figured out if you are able to understand what was the reason that the author put that particular sentence or statement or factual statement, anything of that sort, in that particular passage. And whatever doubts you guys have, put it in the comment section or in the Telegram batch group, and I'll answer those questions there. We can work out those doubts over there. So yeah, that would be it. It was great having you guys here. Bye bye.
Hi guys, I hope you enjoyed the session. One thing is that, if you have any questions, you can drop us a text on the Telegram. There's a fun announcement for all of you that we are coming up with a CR course in the upcoming 5-6 days. We will try to have 5-6 basics, like more sessions like these. Details will follow on the Telegram. Do let us know the topics that you want us to cover. And one thing that we will make sure is that those sessions are taken in a very English, which is Hindi plus English sort of a way, so that people who face issues with the this particular section have it like more easier. Do let us know, right? Right. With this, I think we'll end the session. Do let us know if you have anything in the Telegram on the Telegram group. Thank you for joining.